Conditions May Apply by CinnamonPinecones. Read by Distracted by Books. Chapter 149, Tonal Whiplash, the chapter. Likely surprising to no one who knew what happened last time he had celebrated his birthday, Hitoshi did not like celebrating birthdays. One dad, hate, crime, murder combo is all it takes for the whole process to seem like more trouble than it's worth, he supposed. Neither he nor his mom had celebrated a birthday in 7 years. Even with all his baggage, the prospect of being in charge of orchestrating Midoriya's birthday wasn't as upsetting as he had thought it would be. Maybe his trauma meter got filled up at the USJ, or maybe it had just been long enough for him to finally start to get over it. Well, over the birthday part, not the rest of it. He honestly didn't think he was ever going to be over the rest of it. His dad wouldn't want him to be so hung up on birthdays. He'd known that for 7 years. Maybe it was finally getting through his thick skull. Doing something for someone else was always easier than doing it for yourself anyways. He could do this for Midoriya. They'd made a plan. Aizawa was going to hold Midoriya back from lunch for a little bit, and he was going to ask everyone over this weekend. Super easy. Just ask a bunch of people he hardly knew over to his house. A bunch of people who had been side-eyeing him ever since he had started occasionally sitting with them. Yep, easy. Oh, hi, Shinso. Do you know what Aizawa-sensei held Midoriya back for? Uraraka greeted him as he took his seat. As expected, they only talked to him if it had something to do with Midoriya. Good thing he could make this about Midoriya and not himself. 'Cause I asked him to, he answered honestly. Uraraka tilted her head like a confused puppy. Ida somehow both raised and furrowed his brow, and Todoroki actually made a microscopic facial shift, just enough to look vaguely confused. Midoriya's birthday is this Saturday, and I'm hosting a surprise party. You're all invited, he explained. Oh, this will be so fun! I didn't know his birthday was coming up, Uraraka exclaimed. Neither did I. Thank you for alerting us, Shinso-kun, Ida added. Todoroki had a slight frown on his face, but otherwise he said nothing. What's the plan? Oh, we need to get gifts too. What would he like? Uraraka mused aloud. I'm getting him some sketchbooks and some nice pencils, he offered. Does he draw? Uraraka asked with a sad lilt to her tone, as if she was upset that she didn't know that already. Midoriya was touchy about those notebooks. He probably shouldn't have said that. Good, good, good. He was already messing this up. Yeah, or at least he used to, he answered, hoping they would drop the subject. I wonder why he stopped, she replied. He does seem rather involved in his studies. Though that's admirable, it does not help narrow down gift options. Ida added, he could imagine that being damn near top of the class and juggling homelessness didn't leave much time for hobbies. Furthermore, hiding homelessness didn't lend itself to letting people get close enough to you to know what you'd like for your birthday. He was glad to have called dibs on his gift idea because he genuinely didn't know what else Midoriya even liked. You two could steal your parents' credit cards and get him a gaming console. He sucks at video games, but he had fun when we played them, he half-joked to Ida and Todoroki. It was something he would have said to Midoriya when they were still friends. Or, no, they are friends now. Whatever. He was hoping the transitive property of humor applied here. Greenie was friends with him, and they would have joked about that. And now he was friends with these people, and they maybe joked about that. Ida and Todoroki actually didn't seem to have any sort of grasp on sarcasm. That was probably a bad call. As he should have expected, Ida looked scandalized, and Uraraka laughed, but Todoroki just looked pensive. Wait, was he actually considering it? I don't know much about video games. Could we get him one to play on a computer? Ida suggested. Hitoshi thought about the old laptop Midoriya had brought into the library years ago. Unless he's gotten a new computer, I don't think his laptop could even run a game of solitaire. He cringed. How much is a console? Maybe we could pool funds, Ida proposed. Oh, I was joking. They're pretty expensive. Probably at least 40,000 for a new one, he answered. Neither Todoroki nor Ida made a face like that price was out of the question. Man, being rich must be nice. Uraraka, however, had gone quiet. She looked nervous, but Hitoshi knew better than to bring it up. Why don't we make a group chat? We can plan there, she suggested when she caught his eye. She typed something into her phone frantically, and Hitoshi noted that the phone in question was, in fact, a flip phone. All right, yeah, being rich was nice, he supposed. She handed over her phone to add his number into, and he clicked the physical buttons on the device in order to do so. That was one thing modern phones lacked. The buttons gave a nice, satisfying click. You didn't get that on a touch screen. Good suggestion, Uraraka, and just in time. Midoriya is en route, Ida warned. Subject change. Todoroki, go, he prompted with a dramatic arm chop. Hitoshi bit his lip to hold in a laugh. Was Todoroki his go-to for conversation topics? I think Hawks was grown in the lab to act as a government puppet. He deadpanned. No amount of biting his lip could have held in the laugh that escaped him in response to that. He didn't remember the last time he had heard Todoroki say that many words in a row, and that's what broke the trend. Thankfully, he wasn't the only one laughing. Uraraka, who he was quickly discovering was the only sane person here, giggled. However, it sounded like a long-suffering laugh, like she was used to this kind of thing from him. Think about it. No one has topped the charts that young in history. He's charismatic, and his quirk can be used for any field of heroics. He's too perfect. Something's got to be off. He insisted. Who are we talking about? Midoriya asked, having joined the group halfway through Todoroki's conspiracy theory. Hawks. Todoroki posited that he was grown in a lab to act as a, quote, government puppet. Ida answered with a straight face. The birds work for the bourgeoisie. He muttered mostly to himself. Uraraka, who was closest to him, snorted in response. He looked up, surprised that she had even heard him, much less got the joke. She was smiling and giving him a knowing look. He turned back to Midoriya, who was standing with his tray halfway to the table with an incredibly concerned look on his face. Were they all conspiracy theorists? Was Uraraka really the only other sane person here? Shota called All Might aside earlier today to tell him he needed to speak with him at lunch, and he was beginning to regret it as the time drew nearer. He knew his distaste for the man was childish, but it is what it is. Hizashi had told him that if he just acted like he didn't hate the man, then things wouldn't be so bad, because Yagi was a, quote, chronic people pleaser, close quote, and the more you seemed to dislike him, quote, the more he fell into his hero persona, close quote. Whatever, it was a quick favor. The conversation shouldn't take long. Yagi walked into the room just after Midoriya walked out. He heard them chat briefly in the hallway, but it was nothing of import, just awkward niceties. Though Midoriya didn't sound as frightened by a 7-foot-tall skeletal stranger running into him as Shota would have guessed he would. Maybe he'd seen him around before. Hello, Aizawa. You wanted to see me? Yagi asked from the doorway. Yes, close the door, please, he answered, trying his best to make his ever-present monotone not sound like personal judgment. Yagi looked tired, more so than usual. He hadn't been in the news much, at least not that Shota had seen. So it wasn't from hero work. What kept All Might up at night, he wondered. Probably hacking up blood. Hizashi wasn't wrong. He should probably try to foster a little more sympathy for the man, even if he fundamentally disagreed with him on most things. I've been informed that when Midoriya's mother left, he sold his All Might merchandise to make ends meet. His birthday is this Saturday. I assume you see where I'm going with this. He wasted no time getting into it. Oh, yes. I have plenty of backstock that I can get my hands on. I didn't know his birthday was coming up. I guess I never asked. Things have been hectic. Yagi trailed off as he looked over Shota's shoulder at nothing. That's putting it mildly, he muttered, mostly to himself. The corner of Yagi's lip twitched upward with a sad half smile in response. Don't get anything huge or extravagant. Keep it small and don't overwhelm him, he warned. Yes, I've gotten the sense that he doesn't accept kindness very easily, Yagi said with a humorless laugh. That's putting it mildly, he repeated himself. Yagi didn't bother faking a laugh at his poor attempt at humor. He just frowned in agreement. Is there anything else I can do? Yagi asked. No, not that I can think of. His friends are organizing a surprise party, last I heard. I think it's best we leave them to it, he answered. I don't just mean his birthday. I meant anything. With him or the case. Yagi trailed off. He had to bring it up, didn't he? This is about Izuku. Not your pride, Shota. He'd filed the paperwork he needed to file to get an international be on the lookout out for his mother. But for such a small case, there was very little chance that anything would come of it. If All Might kicked up a fuss about it, though, well, then people would be more inclined to listen. He really didn't want to work a case with All Might. I don't suppose you have connections in China? He asked before he could back out of it. What kind of connections? Yagi answered with a question of his own. His mother, Inko Midoriya's last known whereabouts, was a flight to China 4 years ago. On paper, she has yet to return to the country, he explained. Oh, I see. I'll see what I can do, he answered. His hands were fidgeting with his pocket now, like he was restraining himself from making calls immediately. She also has dual citizenship in Korea, born in Japan to a Korean mother and a Japanese father. Might be worth checking out if the China lead runs dry. I've gone through the conventional channels to get investigations started in both countries, but I'm sure you can imagine that my name doesn't have as much pull as yours. Yagi scoffed good-naturedly at the light jab. Yes, I have noticed that bureaucracy runs much more smoothly for All Might than it does for Yagi. I'm sure it does, he deadpanned, realizing too late that it probably sounded like another jab at him. Yagi pursed his lips and looked at the floor with a nod. Damn it. Anything else? Yagi asked, clearly looking for a dismissal. No, I think it's best for him to get the situation handled swiftly, so thank you. He tried to make his words sound as genuine as he meant for them to sound. The smile on Yagi's face told him that he had succeeded. Of course, like I said, I want to help in any way that I can, he replied. He nodded to the taller man and wordlessly dismissed him by turning his attention back to the papers on his desk. Short essay responses he'd been meaning to grade all week. Hitoshi didn't get around to checking the group chat that Uraraka had made until he got home. Unknown number, 12:13 p.m. Hey yo, this is Uraraka. Unknown number, 3:02 p.m. I am Ida. Of course, he would wait to send that message until school was officially over, even though they had tacit permission to use their phones during lunch. Hitoshi supposed that left the last number to be Todoroki. Uraraka, 3:15 p.m. So, what's the plan? Shinso, 3:36 p.m. My place at noon on Saturday. We don't have much of a plan, just hanging out. Can everyone make that, or should we change the time? Uraraka, 3:39 p.m. I'll be there. You're in Mustafu, right? Shinso, 3:40 p.m. Yeah, like a 15-minute train ride from UA. Ida, 3:40 p.m. I have no other plans. Barring catastrophe, I will be there. Well, 2 out of 3 was good. He was considering texting Todoroki directly to actually get a response out of him, but it wasn't that urgent. He could afford to give him time. If he didn't respond by tomorrow, then he could just ask in person. Thankfully, the situation didn't make it to such drastic measures as face-to-face social interaction. Todoroki, 8:57 p.m. I am not sure whether my father will allow me to go or not. I will be sure to get a gift regardless. Shinso, 9:03 p.m. Just tell him it's a study group. What's he gonna do? Prohibit you from getting a better education? Todoroki, 9:04 p.m. That might work. Thank you for the suggestion. Ida, 9:05 p.m. Lying is not a viable suggestion. Uraraka, 9:10 p.m. Come on, Ida. It's for Midoriya, scowly face. He ignored the ensuing conversation about integrity in which Ida would inevitably cave because, as much as he tried to play lawful good, there was only so much one could do in the face of Midoriya being disappointed. He had big old puppy dog eyes, without even trying. When he was actually sad, they were a lethal weapon. He was pretty sure he only stayed mad at him for as long as he had, because he spent so much time staring at the back of his head. He was still mad at him, to a degree, but it was difficult to hold on to amidst all the guilt. The more he thought about their relationship, the more things started to make sense in context. If Midoriya really was quirkless for most of his life, then that would explain why he ran out of the arcade that one time they almost ran into one of his classmates. It also made sense why he was so scared to tell them anything. If he had been kicked while he was down his whole life, then Hitoshi could imagine that vulnerability would not be his strong suit. It takes one to know one, he supposed. It hurt to think that Midoriya would think that they would do that to him, but he wasn't any better. He had feared the same about Midoriya before he found out about his quirk. All his anger did was drive him around in circles, and it was quickly running out of gas. The guilt, however, had no problems filling in the gaps left behind. The anger had been much easier to cope with. Uraraka, 9:22 p.m. Hey, Shinso, I think Ida and Todoroki are actually going to get Midoriya a Switch. I don't know what to get him. I don't have the money to buy anything, so I was going to make something, but after what you said at lunch today, I realized I don't actually know much about him, frowny face. Do you have any ideas? Shinso, 9:23 p.m. I haven't talked to him in over a year until last week, so I don't know that I know him much more than you do. He's a pretty private person. The only other interests of his that I know about are heroics related, parkour, martial arts, and heroes in general. He's going to be overwhelmed if they do end up getting him a Switch, so it's probably better if you get something small anyways. He hoped to ease her guilt a bit with that. Midoriya did not make himself easy to get to know, and that wasn't her fault. Uraraka, 9:25 p.m. That makes sense. I could make a cake for everyone. Shinso, 9:25 p.m. That's a good idea. It'll be for everyone, so he can't feel bad about it. Uraraka, 9:26 p.m. ... Shinso, 9:26 p.m. What? Uraraka, 9:27 p.m. I have remembered that I don't have any baking pans, or most baking ingredients, or an oven. Shinso, 9:28 p.m. ... What? Uraraka, 9:28 p.m. I room in a hostel. All I have is a stovetop and a microwave. Crying face. It's basically a dorm. He was going to regret introducing his mother to her, wasn't he? Well, at least she was the most normal of the three. He had a feeling he was about to gain a quasi-sibling after this. Shinso, 9:30 p.m. You can come over early and use our kitchen. Uraraka, 9:30 p.m. Thank you! Double tear face. Ochako had no clue what to expect going over to Shinso's house. She honestly had no clue what to expect from Shinso himself, either. Neither he nor Midoriya had explained what happened at the beginning of the year, or why they were friends again now. She tried to ask Midoriya, but he very clearly did not want to talk about it, so she let the subject drop. Shinso had gone from glaring daggers into Midoriya's head all day, every day, to sitting with them at lunch more often than not. The situation was weird, to say the least. She didn't know what really went down between the two of them. All she knew was that Midoriya lied about leaving the country and ghosted Shinso, which honestly sounded like a pretty crappy thing to do. But she knew Midoriya well enough to know he wouldn't do that if there wasn't a good reason for it. She didn't know Shinso enough to know that he wasn't the reason. He seemed nice, but the way he'd been looking at Midoriya for the past few months made her hesitant to buy into him so easily. Sure, she was biased. Midoriya was her friend, and Shinso wasn't. But knowing that logically didn't change how she felt emotionally. He was funny, if nothing else. Watching him interact with Ida and Todoroki was hilarious because at least 60% of what he said was laced with lethal amounts of sarcasm that the other boys were completely immune to. She'd heard Midoriya make a handful of jokes over the last few months, but with Shinso at the lunch table, that tally had doubled in a week's time. They made each other laugh constantly. It was refreshing. She hadn't noticed how unhappy the two were separated until they were together again. All in all, she was a little nervous, but she wasn't worried. The house that Shinso's directions led her to was nice. It wasn't extravagant, but it looked to be in a pretty good area, and there were 2 floors. It even looked like the place had a backyard. She triple-checked that the number on the front of the house matched the number Shinso had sent her and cautiously knocked. Thankfully, she didn't have to wait very long before a familiar plume of purple hair peeked through the doorway. You made it. I was starting to worry. I think I would end up in Tokyo if I tried to get to your place without GPS. And I've lived in this city my entire life, Shinso greeted. You should practice. It's a good skill to have, she replied. We could drop you off in Tokyo and make you find your way back, she heard a voice call from down the hall. That must be Shinso-san. She could see where Shinso got his humor from. Shinso just rolled his eyes and opened the door for her. You better get used to that. She's only going to get worse when Midoriya shows up. It's like an echo chamber of sarcasm. Shinso warned her as he led her down the hall and into the kitchen, where the voice from earlier had originated. You must be Uraraka. I'm Kohaku, or Shinso-san, whichever you prefer. I don't mind either way. The voice in question introduced herself. Nice to meet you, Shinso-san, she answered. I told Toshi to tell you not to bring all that. We have plenty, Shinso-san chided her while taking the grocery bag out of her hands. I told her, Shinso defended himself. He did. I just figured if you didn't need the strawberries, it wouldn't hurt to have extra to snack on. And everyone could use eggs and sugar, right? Thanks, kiddo. We have everything on the recipe you sent. Why don't you take the eggs and sugar home with you? Toshi, you want to rinse these and set them in a bowl for later? Shinso-san said as she passed the strawberries to her son. So far, neither of the Shinsos had been anything but kind to her. She still held a grudge for Midoriya's sake, but her grip was getting looser by the second. Her curiosity, however, was becoming more and more of a problem, because if the Shinsos weren't secretly horrible, then why the heck did Midoriya do what he did? Hitoshi wasn't completely hopeless at reading other people. Sure, he was pretty damn excluded from most socialization as a child, but he'd picked up enough from reading and people watching to know that Uraraka did not like him. Or, at least, she held a grudge. She joked around and never acted like she disliked him. She never made him feel unwelcome. But there was something nagging at him, some imperceptible coldness about her whenever he was around. He couldn't blame her either, really. He should be grateful she made an effort to hide her distaste at all, because he didn't deserve that kindness. His own grudge seemed so childish now that he knew the truth. There's no way he could have guessed what was going on behind all the lies Midoriya told, but he had known something was going on, and yet he still clung to his anger because it was easier. Uraraka was trying, at least. That was more than he could have said for himself. He'd been washing dishes for the two of them as they made them because making cake wasn't really a three-person activity. But it felt wrong to just leave Uraraka alone here with his mom. So he just stood there awkwardly washing one dish like every 3 minutes or so. He was playing a game with himself of how many times he could wash the mixing spoon before they noticed. So far it was 3 times, but his mom had given him a look, so he's not sure if he had gotten away with that last one or not. Eventually, the moment he was dreading arrived. They put the cake in the oven, and his mom excused herself, leaving him alone with their guest. He had a feeling that the look she had given him after washing the spoon had more to do with the fact that she knew they needed to talk about something than it was about his shenanigans. 30 minutes, you said? He asked to clarify as he set a timer on his phone. No, I said 25 to 30 minutes. You set the timer for the lower number in case it burns. She corrected him kindly. That would make more sense, he mused under his breath as he adjusted the timer. An awkward silence fell over the room, and Hitoshi counted the seconds before Uraraka asked the inevitable question. 48 seconds. Can I ask what the situation is with all of this? I mean, you and Midoriya weren't even on speaking terms. It's a long story, he interrupted. Great, yeah, interrupt her. A widely accepted way to get into someone's good graces, Hitoshi. You really nailed that. Well, we've got, 24 and a half minutes? 23 minutes and 54 seconds, he corrected. Is the 36-second difference going to be a problem? She asked sarcastically. Yeah, it takes exactly 24 and a half minutes to explain, sorry. You don't have to tell me. I mean, it's really not my business. I don't know what to think, she trailed off and let the awkward silence return. 73 seconds. It was a misunderstanding. Midoriya thought I was better off without him around, so he lied and left. Well, not really left, but you know what I mean. It's not his fault. He relented. That didn't even take 24 and a half seconds, she pointed out. He scoffed out a laugh at that. Uraraka had a hidden side. She wasn't usually so sardonic. Maybe that was for Ida and Todoroki's benefit. If the three of them were slinging faux insults at each other constantly, they would probably be very confused. He and Midoriya together were already bad enough. I don't suppose I'm going to get any more explanation than that, she pushed. It's not my business to say anything else. Midoriya, he's been through a lot. I don't think he should. No, I know you shouldn't ask him about it, he warned. Yeah, I got that feeling. He's odd, I guess. Like he's scared to be himself half the time? Uraraka replied solemnly. That was a good way of putting it. Midoriya seemed to bounce between dispositions constantly. He was a timid, frightened mess one second, and then a cool, level-headed tactician the next. Then there was the part of him he'd seen last time he was over, angry and defensive and self-deprecating at the same time. Hitoshi didn't know all the different sides of his friend. He didn't really know who Midoriya was anymore. Maybe Midoriya didn't even know who he was supposed to be. Is there anything I can do to help? Uraraka interrupted his spiraling thoughts. He stifled a laugh at that question. He had asked Aizawa the same thing just a few days ago. Maybe they were both in the hero course for a reason. Just being there for him like you have been is enough, he answered, remembering what Aizawa had told him. Doesn't seem like enough, she replied. No, it really doesn't, does it? The silence returned for a third time, but this time it was more sad than awkward. He didn't really explain anything, but it felt like they were on the same page now, or at least he hoped they were. All right, let's start making that frosting. His mom barged into the room excitedly, shattering the melancholic atmosphere that had been gathering there. End of chapter.